Is that what you called it? He said, laughing so hard he slammed his hand on the table. God, that's just cute. How are things there? A boat, a spark, something like a cheap ITC knockoff. There were 12 people at the table. No one was looking at me. Only the sound of pens, coughing, and the whirring of the projector fan. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, as if waiting to be excused from a parent-teacher conference. Across from me sat Mark, our CTO. He grinned like he'd just won a high school football game where he played against himself. Look, I love side projects. We've all had them. I used to DJ at weddings myself in college. But let's focus on the main thing. He turned back to the slides, clicking the clicker as if my honor hadn't been trampled on the conference table. We have real growing pains, real users, real revenue. If we're going to think about ideas, we definitely shouldn't waste time on someone else's pet project. He made quotation marks with his fingers. His throat burned. They weren't from tears for a long time. We froze for 3 years under his ego. And because I was holding on, clutching the chair so tightly, I could feel the foam being pressed into it. I caught the eye of Marissa, our head designer. She immediately turned away, but I managed to notice that expression. The kind that says, I know it's unfair, but I won't fight for you. No one ever will. Okay, Mark continued, clicking his clicker like a conductor before an orchestra of confused interns. These are our forecasts for the second quarter. Any questions? Just not about the circle, DIY crafts. He looked straight at me. There was a slight laughter in the room, awkward, but enough to make it clear. Nobody is going to stand up for me. I smiled. More precisely, she put on that forced office smile that you learn in those male-dominated companies where praise is currency, and any disagreement is reported to HR. No questions, I said. And indeed, they were no longer there. There were only plans because Mark didn't know, none of them knew. My hobby project, which he just laughed at, had 112,000 active users. In the last quarter, it generated a net profit of $320,000. Signed 3 contracts for micro warehouses in 5 states. A kind was rewritten by my friend Liff, a former Amazon engineer who didn't need the money, but liked the idea of building something quietly outside the Silicon Valley circus. They also didn't know that I had already studied their system, where it was weak. Not for sabotage, not for theft, just to understand how deep the rot goes. Because when a person like Mark laughs in your face, it's not just his ego. This is a map. She shows where he is blind. And then, on that day, in that laughter, I asked for approval for something for the last time. The last time I presented the idea, I made it sound like I needed permission to think bigger. I walked out of that glass aquarium with my laptop under my arm, and my gaze glued to the exit sign as if it were a neon sign of the universe itself. Go. Nobody noticed, nobody stopped. Mark already mentioned the next point. Supplier optimization for Q3. Ironically, as I walked past the elevators, my phone vibrated. Message from Otlif LLC is ready. Stripe is connected. Orders are already coming in. I didn't answer. I simply stepped into the elevator, looked at my reflection in the shiny wall, and let the silence fill the space. He laughed, and I just opened the door. 2 hours after Mark's laughter echoed through the walls of the conference room, I was already sitting on the floor at home, wearing an old hoodie that I hadn't washed since the last system crash. My Bluetooth cat slept right on the router like he was paying rent. Nearby is a half-eaten candy bar and a sticker that says Liff, Rewrite Warehouse Synchronization. The second monitor was shining like a fire. There are 3 tabs with code on the screen, Shophook debugger, and a table with a new batch of orders. 221 orders, 0 returns, $18,490 net profit for the month. Slack beeped. Leaf checked the logs for the warehouse in Kansas. Everything is fine. Workers are happy with the new barcode. I cracked my neck, reached for water, and didn't answer. There was no need. She already knew the rhythm. 6 months ago, I'm sitting in the back row of the quarterly report, watching Mark talk about new integration capabilities. And quietly, under the table, I sent a commit for a new way to fix the broken synchronization of Shopev with our raw API. That night, I told the bra, I don't want to be their competition. I just want to leave. She replied, then let's make something so good that they'll have to scale through you. She said this over Zoom, sitting in her garage in Boise with servers on her back and boxes of Legos. Leaf is one of those people who solves multi-threading problems in their sleep and considers NDAs to be just advice. That same night, we bought a dominatrix. Spike Sparkroll was a joke. We had the project's real name behind redirects and DNS. Until we're ready. The lawyers, paid from severance pay after the failed crypto venture, registered in Delaware because, according to Leaf, that's where the sharks play. By the second month, I quietly hired her ex-designer from Romania. She made the dashboard cleaner than anything our company has produced in years. I paid her with money I made reselling Return Smart thermostats. Another mini business. I did all this from a rented warehouse behind a car wash. Our stack was Frankenstein at first. Laravel, Zapper, semi-working prototype. Nalif wrote a script that automatically aligned SKUs across platforms. And suddenly we overtook our employer's ERP plugin for $40,000. I sat up all night until testing extreme scenarios and dozing between whip-hook drops. And one day, I woke up in the middle of the night, and there was a confirmation of a successful payment on the screen. A large order from a local city saleswoman who didn't want to use Amazon for delivery. She left a note. "Thank you for being there. Amazon kept losing my embroidery kits. And then I realized that this is not just a hobby, it is air. The more my ideas were rejected at work, the more fuel I had. I offered a backup layer for order synchronization. They said it was a waste of resources. Offered reserve warehouses. Mark chuckled. We are not Amazon. Let's not pretend to be his copy. I saved each refusal in a folder. Not out of anger, but out of habit. I learned it early. Silence is not defeat, it is data collection. I kept proofs, made mock-ups he never even looked at, saved logs, tested Wiccan's night sampers, slipped in fixes he later called luck when they closed bugs he didn't even understand. One night at 1:24 a.m., Leaf wrote, "We need a parent company. Customers are getting too serious. We're not just candles and costume sets anymore. A cosmetics company contacted us. They need monthly delivery and cold storage of vitamins. We now have options." I opened a legal account, registered the Hexing Sruzern LC company, paid for the express registration, signed the documents, and sent a screenshot. She responded with a nod. "Where's the cop yelling? You now have a logistics platform." I laughed for the first time in weeks. We no longer ran away from joy, but from understanding. We were digging a tunnel from under the prison, and I was already halfway to the light. At 7:42 a.m., an urgent letter arrived. Bottleneck on the core at D3. I drank coffee and scrolled through the warehouse dashboards like others playing UADR. The alarm was real. Delay at warehouse in Indiana. We don't wash it. At 9 a.m., I walked into the morning call with a decision in hand. Printout, notes, color marks for risks. I made a load switching protocol. Some of the traffic would go to 2 backup nodes. Yes, this meant a temporary contract with a smaller partner, but it was cheaper than compensating for 3-day delivery delays. I put the bag on the table. I'm monitoring the load. If we send 40% of D3 scoring orders to secondary nodes and fix the API logic, we can reduce latency. Mark raised his hand like a teacher at school. Quietly, he said, without even looking at the paper. Before you go full-on Raymond about logistics, let's remember, we're not reinventing the wheel here. The air froze. I continued. We've already lost $12 in fines this month. The queue at vendors is overcrowded. This is a scalable solution. It's all unnecessary engineering. He interrupted louder, more distinctly, as if he were doing me a favor by explaining. Classic bloat. And by the way, the last thing I remember is you're not in charge of infrastructure. The worst part wasn't even his words. It was his look at the 2 junior developers sitting at the end of the table, barely old enough to rent a car. A smug look. Look how I keep the menagerie under control. I felt my heart inside shrink and turn to stone. He didn't flare up in anger, but settled down like oil at the bottom of an empty deep fryer. Heavy, sticky forever. I calmly closed the folder and pulled it towards me. She didn't even sigh. She just said, "I understand." He immediately returned to the screen and clicked on further. Now let's move on to GTM plans for the 3rd quarter. Jason, you have a marketing update. The rest of the meeting passed me by in a stream of acronyms and slides. I didn't listen. I only heard my own pulse. Not fast, but smooth and decisive. That evening, I stayed in the office to finish the tests. In fact, I started recording everything: supplier logins, contract terms, integration dependencies, everything that his team never documented. Not to steal, to understand. I noted the S3 bucket of non-backup copies, a fragile link in Zapper that processed priority orders. All dependence on one warehouse without regional backup. It wasn't a system, but a Jenga tower assembled by a drunk man angry at his ex. I sat alone in the break room at midnight, munching stale pretzels from the vending machine and watching the ice melt in my half-drunk Diet Coke. The lamp overhead crackled like a small broken lie. Mark thought he had closed the conversation by calling my ideas reverse engineering. But he didn't close it. He started the merger, because from that moment on I no longer built anything nearby. I built around him. I decided that every mistake, every gap that he covered up with self-confidence, I would turn into my takeoff. The difference between a competitor and a replacement is just one decision. And I just accepted it. Now the silence was not emptiness. It was a forge. Every morning I arrived at 8:59, nodded during Mark's briefings, pretended to write down his strategies, and actually recorded the failures. Every evening I got on the train home and transformed. Same hoodie, same table, but different mind. I was no longer surviving. I was building. While he was juggling fashionable words, I negotiated directly with a warehouse chain in a neighboring state. Liv rewrote the routing engine over the weekend on energy drinks and the Envoy's dead metal. Now he knew how to distribute orders across 4 regions based on the availability of goods and the reliability of carriers. Our working software looked like a piece of junk made from paper clips and hopes compared to this. On Wednesdays, I had therapy. In fact, these were meetings with our new intellectual property lawyer. He used to work in a shop, and now he was handling major brand cases from a house in Vermont. The lawyer charged $600 an hour, but he made our company's shell invulnerable and registered trademarks so carefully that no one could find fault with us. I named the company Hushuan Fall Filtsu. Leaf hated the name, saying it sounded like a Marva villain startup. I replied that this is how it should be. We didn't want to look cute. We built a shadow infrastructure with claws. At work, they allowed software licenses to expire. I bought them quietly through Hex. These are the same licenses our company previously used to access carriers and real-time inventory maps. I watched from the shadows as their developers struggled to rewrite what I now had access to. And the first contracts arrived. Not loud, not the kind that make the news, but right. Small business in Nevada, meal kits, same-day delivery needed within a 50-mile radius. A Midwest distributor tired of waiting for answers from his shoppers and partner. The sock subscription service was required to be plastic-free and have individual inserts. Hexing took them all. We didn't promise scale. We promised reliability. And then one evening a message arrives from a supplier representative. Hello. Random question. You are the same Hushuan who signed a contract with us. Your CTO from 9 Defis to Defis 5 just wrote to me about premium access. Should I keep these conversations separate? I sat and looked at the screen. That same contract for 180 thousandths of a dollar that we signed with their logistics partners, the ones that Mark got persuaded to give us dedicated API bandwidth without paying a premium. We didn't steal anything. We just paid on time. Keep it separate. Just business, I typed. And then I realized that this contract meant more than just money, more than just influence. Mark's entire empire was based on ostentatious loyalty, handshakes, and the belief that no one would question his throne. But vendors don't worship charisma. They follow contracts, payments, uptime, results. Leaf sent a screenshot. Confirmation from the partner's backend. Hex is a priority client. The API channel is fixed. The fulfillment slot has been allocated. We celebrated with no champagne or pompous messages. Just a short pause between us. Ilif said, he will feel it soon. Are you sure you want this? I didn't answer right away, but I knew I didn't want to hurt him. I wanted him to understand that I existed, that while he laughed and brushed it off, I built something that he would now have to pay to access. And when the time came, I had no intention of hiding it. I was going to send an invoice. At 10:06 a.m., a message arrives at SLK. During the sprint review, his hop escalation. High priority. Delay at 3 p.m. The large order has not yet been shipped. The supplier does not respond to second-level tickets. Does anyone have any info? Mark read it out loud, as if it were a personal insult. Not sent. So, the problem is on the developer's side. Has anyone checked the queue? He didn't wait. Just turned to Jason, the newbie from boot camp. Raise the logs. If there is an error in Tratrol, mark it. If not, write a post-mortem and prepare an apology to the client. Jason blinked as if he had been handed a live grenade. I didn't say anything. I didn't even turn away from the screen. I just watched Jason fumble with the tabs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as if on a trigger. I knew it wasn't Tratrol's fault, a lost packet, a developer's oversight, or Mercury in retrograde motion. It was Roland. 2 days ago, Leaf sent a warning. Roland wants to renegotiate old contracts. He says some clients are having bandwidth issues. Translation: they carefully squeeze out those who do not pay. Mark's company is among them. And so it began. The first push. Jason flipped through the pages nervously. Paint seems to be alive, but the supplier only accepts part of the package. Mark frowned. CA and B. We have priority access. I turned around and asked calmly. Oh, right, yes, we signed an integration contract last year. Has it been extended? I asked with an even voice and an empty face. Mark hesitated. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. We're a major partner for them. I didn't say anything. I just blinked. A heavy silence fell. Pink is back in SLK. Message from Roland. Hi, Mark. Let me remind you of the new terms and conditions that we sent out last week. The priority status needs to be updated. Otherwise, there will be restrictions. Would you like a call? Let's discuss it. Mark read the message 3 times as if it were a foreign language. New conditions. Were the new conditions? He muttered and quickly dialed. We received nothing. Were the new conditions? The answer came immediately. Subject of the letter. Updated priority access structure. Posted 6 days ago. Check your spam. The contact specified is the one listed in the new access policy. Mark whispered, new access policy. Here it is. I made the paperwork changes myself. Our address is, our legal entity, and me. Main contact. Everything is as Roland promised. Polite letter subject and PDF with conditions. Premium fees, traffic priority, API limits. It's business as usual, unless you live under the illusion that a handshake is more powerful than someone else's bill. Mark pushed himself away from the table. Call him Scalar White. We don't revise anything. They depend on us more than we depend on them. I turned off the microphone, leaned back in my chair, and took a sip of coffee as if it were a $10,100 bottle of champagne. Because I knew something that Mark didn't. Vendors don't need to show off. They need guarantees. They need stability. They want clients who respond to emails, pay on time, and don't treat developers like interns. And he will soon find out. On its own API call, the war room smelled of roasted coffee and panic. Mark stood at the board, drawing circles around the squares, as if trying to banish the delay itself. This is not a system problem, just a Tratrol failure. We'll patch the queue, restart the handlers, and have everything back up and running by the end of the day. Nobody believed him. Not the director of operations, sitting stiff as plywood. Not the CFO whispering to the assistants about overnight returns. Not the junior engineer who clearly wanted to invent appendicitis just to escape. And definitely not me. I sat in the corner, the tech rep, chewing the inside of my cheek while Mark tried to pass off the system collapse as a minor Tuesday problem. Our orders are already late in 4 states, Obsham said in a dry voice. In 24 hours, we picked 3 S's. Shopee marked our delivery times as unreliable. Mark waved it off. Yes, they will go away. We've had delays. Let Roland restart the channel. It's just a formality. The phone vibrated. Message low tide. Roland received Mark's letter. A real bomb. He called their service a joke. Get out the popcorn. I just turned the phone face down and continued watching. Mark's Gmail opened on the projector. He clicked on the letter. Subject, Erdrin, Ethics Thu. And he began to read aloud, as if it were a manifesto. Your failures and priorities are unacceptable. Our relationship is built on respect and timely responses. If you don't restore it by the end of the day, we'll go to court. I noticed the CFO's gaze. He actually sent it without lawyers. That sounds harsh. Op said cautiously. You actually press send. Why should I crawl on my knees? And not an ordinary contractor, not the State Department. Mark flared up. The door swung open. Enter Jenna, Vice President of Customer Trust. Didn't even sit down. Just spoke with a major client. 190 orders are pending, taking over 2 days to process. They are already making noise. We're working on it, Mark said abruptly. Then you shouldn't have waited until the fire reached their door, she replied coldly. Silence fell over the room. Only someone let out a loud sigh. And then, as if on cue, a reply came from Roland. Mark silently opened the email. As we've already written, priority access is only available to premium customers. We've attached the new contract. Please send all future questions to the new contact. Mark frowned. What new contact? He muttered, scrolling through the attachment. He scrolled down. His jaw tensed again. What the heck, sunk? Solutions. I tilted my head slightly. At that moment, everything started to burn. Not quickly, not like gasoline, but like dry boards that slowly but surely begin to smolder. The silence was broken by a forehead. She also offered reservations last quarter. Mark froze. I leaned a little closer. The chair creaked quietly. Yes, I was the one who suggested that. Back then it was called over-engineering. Someone, perhaps CFO, quietly exhaled, almost like a chuckle. Mark remained silent, only clicking on the attachment again, as if the words would change when he opened it again. But no, it was clear there. Schicksnuschernslslc. Main contact. My fee is $1 million. No vargening prepayment. He looked at the screen as if he had just realized that the bridge he was standing on was built by the one he had once humiliated. And I just watched the fire grow, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it sits quietly in the room while the person who called your job a hobby watches their empire begin to crumble. He clicked on the file 5 times, as if on the 6th it would all disappear. A new tab opened with def, letterhead, seal, bold title, and new terms of priority access. Takes effect immediately. Silence reigned in the room. Someone clicked a pen and a chair creaked. Mark zoomed in on the text. Priority service fee. The level of enterprise is $10,000 per year. No discussion. Access tier, dedicated API channel. Early route distribution. 24/7 support line. Mark's lips twitched. Not a smile, more like an ass. $1 million, he repeated, as if the table was supposed to answer with a different amount. We're not buying their company. How much was it last year? 22,500, answered the op. And that was just a one-time thing. We decided not to renew it. Mark laughed sharply. So they raised the price by 4.344% for a small delivery glitch. Nobody answered. He muttered, then louder. This is extortion. I will complain. We have connections. The CFO raised an eyebrow. With whom? Their call center. Mark was already typing a letter. Topic, fee disputé. An immediate review is required. This price is disproportionate and unprofessional. I demand a breakdown of the calculation and a call with your management within an hour. He struck with force, as if victory depended on pressure. He then opened a full contract. It didn't load right away. The second delay infuriated him. The document turned out to be extremely dry. 3 pages. Pricing and SLA table. Jurisdiction and arbitration. Contact information and authorized signatory below. Name hidden. Position of founder of LLC. Date 14 days ago. The signature is visible. His eyes stopped. He hovered over the hidden name. A window popped up. Show. He clicked. It opened up. Simple, bold, unmistakable. My name. Founder and managing director. My work email. For a moment, I thought he was going to laugh again. But no, he just inhaled sharply, as if there was suddenly less air in the room. It was confusion. It was that very moment when a person realizes that the cards are no longer in his hands. Mark slowly moved away from the table, as if any movement would break the spell. Are you kidding? This is a prank. You're not serious. I didn't answer. He looked at me for real. For the first time in 4 years, he saw not a signature on letters or a name on jurors' tasks, but a man who held his future in his hands. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My name and the invoice were displayed on the screen. The meeting room was all glass and tension. A large oak desk, expensive chairs, screens on the walls. Everything to put pressure on junior employees and impress investors. But today it looked like a courtroom. The 8 leaders sat in their places like pieces on a chessboard. The CEO twirled the man-born pen in his hands. The CFO had already read the printout. The lawyer leafed through the contract with a red pen, ready as gelatin. Mark leaned back, crossing his arms, but his knee under the table was tapping nervously. Knock, knock, knock. Morse code for a man cornered. The CEO started. We got together because our logistics contractor, whom we considered a strategic partner, set new conditions. This has a serious impact on our work. He touched the tablet. Hexing Slusherns LLC has appeared on the big screen. Agreement. Priority access conditions. Takes effect immediately. Cost, $1 million. Prepayment. Everyone in the room sucked in a breath at once. We didn't approve the new contractor. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. We didn't say anything at all, the CFO replied dryly. We thought the old contract was renewed automatically. The CEO turned to Mark. You were the last one to negotiate. Why wasn't this noticed before? Mark straightened up, trying to take control of the situation with his voice. It's out of nowhere. They changed the business model. This is extortion. We have been partners for 2 years. The lawyer coughed. According to the document, the new conditions have been available for 2 weeks. Sent to updated contact. And who else is this? Mark lost his temper. Silence. The CFO scrolled to the end. Freeze. Mark, you should take a look. Mark grabbed the tablet, scrolled down, and saw. My name. Founder and Managing Director Hexen Slusherns LLC. He blinked a couple of times, his mouth hanging open. The blood drained from his face. He looked straight at me. We met eyes for the first time since the day he ridiculed me in front of the whole company. No words, only air, heavy with consequences. He looked at me as if I were a stranger in a familiar body, as if he had fallen into a dream where the janitor suddenly owned the building. You, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't nod, didn't smile, just met his gaze calmly. That's it. Sayo looked from him to me. Is it true? Yes, I answered. Hexen controls the access channel. We bought priority bandwidth and API rights for the entire Midwest and Northeast. Mark opened his mouth again, but there was no sound. Sifo just leaned back in his chair. Oh, Jesus Christ. We've hit a bottleneck because of a guy we don't even hire. You hired me? Calmly, I answered. They just weren't listening. I pushed the printed contract along the table. The sheet slid slowly and stopped right in front of Mark. He didn't even touch it. The CEO looked at the lawyer. Is there a way around it? No. Only if we completely rebuild the logistics system. At least 3 to 6 months. The room was silent again. Only the air conditioner rustled. Someone from the operations department muttered. She did warn us about the reserve, after all. Mark gripped the armrest so tightly his knuckles turned white. I calmly stood up, gathered the folder, tablet, and pen. No one stopped me. Right at the door, I said, I'm waiting for the billing department to contact me. The payment period is 7 days. Late payment will cancel access. I left. No theater, no microphone effect. Just silence and complete confidence. Mark remained sitting, staring at my contract, as if he were looking at a ghost that had finally learned to haunt. The next morning at 7:03 a.m., I had an email in my inbox. Subject, request to revise access terms. From Market, CTO. The text was pure panic in corporate language. He wrote that, given our long relationship, they were willing to pay $275,000 immediately and discuss the rest later, depending on the metrics. I read it twice. The same person who once ridiculed my hobby in front of management, who erased my proposals and laughed in my face. Now he haggles like a tourist at a bazaar. I didn't hesitate, but answered briefly. Priority access requires priority payment. No smiles, no respect. Just the rules. By midday, I was called back into the conference room. The same people, the same table, but the atmosphere was different. Mark looked battered, unshaven, his shirt rumpled, his voice trembling. But Chow spoke first. We're ready to pay in full. But before that, is there an alternative to this scheme? I looked straight at him. Without anger, without pride. Just the truth. The alternative was 14 days ago the room became so quiet that you could hear the old clock on the wall ticking. Mark breathed heavily, trying to swallow his own shadow. It was just a joke, he muttered. I turned to him. Yes, and now it's just a count. I straightened up, picked up the signed copy of the contract on thick paper, and smoothly slid it across the table. Payment period is 6 days. Then we will redistribute your channel. No threats, no shouting, just clear conditions, secured with a seal and signature. I reached the door and stopped for a second. No one moved behind. Mark just looked at the sheet of paper as if it were the tombstones of his ego. And in this silence, if you listened closely, you could hear his laughter from a week ago. Quiet, already empty, and too expensive for himself. M.